The Merchant of Venice by William Shakespeare. There was a time when Venice, a prosperous city in Italy, was known for its riches and rich merchants. The most famous of its merchants was Antonio. He was not only rich but gentle and kind too. In Venice, he was loved and admired by all. But Bassanio, one of his many friends, was nearest to his heart. This dearest friend of Antonio was not rich. He came of a noble family, and as he was used to living beyond his means, he borrowed money from his friend only too often. Antonio always helped his dear friend, and though Bassanio never learned to be modest in his ways, he was too generous to refuse him help. There was another man in Venice. He was Shylock, the Jew who used to lend money at an extremely high rate of interest. Nobody liked him, even his own daughter hated him. He was miserly, mean, and cruel. Antonio disliked Shylock for his cruelties and for his hard dealings. Antonio himself often lent money, but he never charged any interest on that. So he had a strong dislike for Shylock, and whenever he met Shylock, Antonio pestered him with derisive remarks. Shylock nursed his wounds and waited for the day when he would take his revenge. That day came at last. Bassanio was dreaming to marry a rich heiress, Portia. He often visited her, and though the rich, beautiful lady liked him. But then he thought, I'm too poor for her. Why should she accept one of my means when the richest princes were there to win her? But one thing he was sure, that it was Portia who encouraged him, and her kindly inclinations clearly showed her preference, in spite of all the princes and noblemen who vied with one another to be her suitors. Those suitors visited her with expensive presents, showing off their wealth. Bassanio was too poor to buy any presents for Portia, nor had he the money enough to buy himself befitting clothes that would make him feel comfortable in the presence of the rich heiress. Of course, there would still be another hurdle to overcome. When Portia's father died, he left a clever plan behind, as he thought it would help Portia choose the right man for her husband. The plan was simple. There would be 3 boxes of 3 different metals: gold, silver, and lead. One of these boxes would contain a picture of Portia. Now the man who sought to marry Portia must choose the right box in which the picture lay. If he chose the wrong box, he would not only be rejected, he would have to promise that he would never marry any other woman. Portia loved her father dearly and so decided to abide by her wishes. Bassanio believed that the hurdle of the boxes could be overcome. Now what he needed the most was a fairly large amount of money to buy his clothes and the gift, so that he could present himself before Portia on the fateful day in a manner that he would become her suitor. At last he saw his friend Antonio and told him how badly he needed the money. He said, I have a little doubt Portia loves me as much as I love her, but only because I have no money, I can't marry her. Antonio shared the woes of his friend and said, I have never refused you anything. As my dearest friend, you have always found me eager to help you. But right now, I am as poor as you are, for my ships are now at sea. When my ships come home, I'd have all the money in the world. Then he thought for some time and said again, But your Portia cannot wait, so I can borrow the money for you. When my ships come back, it won't be a problem for me to pay it out. Bassanio hesitated and said, But I need 3,000 ducats, and that is a lot of money. I don't see one whom you can go to borrow it. Antonio too must have thought of it. He said, There's one, and you know him, Shylock the Jew. Bassanio was rather shocked to hear the name, for he knew how Antonio hated the Jew. He said, Antonio, you must be living in fool's paradise if you think Shylock will help you. Antonio said, He will. Perhaps his terms would be a little too severe, but when the rich cargoes my ship bring for me, nothing can be too severe. So Antonio and Bassanio went to Shylock. Shylock had no reason to be polite with them. When Antonio asked for the money, he thought, Now I have my chance to pay this man back in his own coins. So long he has treated me like a dog. He hates me because I lend money and charge interest for that. He himself lends money without interest. He bawls out curses whenever he sees me. How can he expect me to forgive him for all this? All these years I have been nursing my wound and waiting for this day when I can take my revenge. Antonio could not quite read his thoughts, so he said, "Please lend me 3,000 ducats, Shylock. I promise to pay you back the day my ships come home." Shylock spoke now with all the venom in his tone. "You have always cursed me, insulted me, and called me a dog. You have even kicked me, spat on me, and now you have come to ask for my help? To ask for money? But how do you expect a dog to have money? And how can a dog lend you 3,000 ducats? And how do you expect me to forgive you for all that shabby treatment you have so far meted out to me?" Shylock's outburst did not have any effect on Antonio. He said, "As I scorn you, I will treat you with as much contempt as you deserve. Even when you have lent me the money, I will kick you and spit on you and call you a dog. I have not come to you as your friend, and I too do not ask you to lend money to a friend. I shall never be your friend, so if you lend me money, you will lend it to an enemy." Now Shylock looked rather amused. He said, "But I would like to forgive you and make friends with you. I will lend you the money you need, and to show that I too can be generous, I will not charge any interest on this." Antonio was really surprised, for he did not expect Shylock to be so generous. But then Shylock said again, "Yes, you won't have to pay any interest for the money, but you must sign a bond promising to give me a pound of your flesh if you fail to pay me back on the day mentioned in it. It would be only a sport, for you can never fail." Antonio also did not doubt that he would pay him back in time, so he said, "I agree to your terms, and I don't see why I should not sign the bond." But Bassanio hated the idea and told Antonio not to sign the bond. Antonio would not listen to him. He took it for a sport. Shylock heard Bassanio and cried out, "Oh God, how incredulous these Christians are! They do not think that I have nothing to gain if Antonio breaks the bond. What would I do with this pound of flesh? I can't eat it like mutton or beef. But still I offer my friendship only to buy Antonio's favor. If he signs the bond, he will get the money. If he doesn't, I can only say goodbye." But Antonio agreed to sign the bond in spite of Bassanio's protests. Thus, Antonio signed the bond and promised to pay the money back within 3 months. If he failed to do, Shylock would have his pound of flesh. Bassanio took the money, bought his clothes, appointed some servants, and set out to meet Portia at Belmont, where she lived. The other suitors were there to try their luck. The Prince of Morocco chose the golden box, for he thought that the picture of such a beautiful lady could not be kept anywhere else. But he was disappointed. The Prince of Aragon in Spain followed him, and his attention was drawn by the look of the silver box. But that box contained only the picture of a fool. All those following them did not fare better. Then Portia heard of Bassanio, who had arrived with his friend, and attended Gratiano. This Gratiano was in love with Nerissa, Portia's maid of honor. As Bassanio had come to marry Portia, Gratiano too would follow suit and marry Nerissa. When Bassanio came with Gratiano, he was received well, for Portia really liked him more than any of her other suitors. But then she had her worries, for if Bassanio had made the same mistake choosing the wrong box, it would not be possible for her to marry him. So she asked Bassanio to take some more time before going in to pick out the right box. But Bassanio refused to wait, so he was led into the room where the boxes were kept. Bassanio saw the boxes and thought for a while. He came to the conclusion that the appearances could often be deceptive, and the picture of the beautiful Portia must be in the lead box. And he made the right choice. The picture was really there. Portia was delighted, for now Bassanio would be her husband. She took her ring and gave it to Bassanio. Bassanio took the ring and promised that he would never part with it. Both of them were happy, and they swore to remain faithful to each other all their life. Bassanio was a little hesitant. He feared that a poor man like him was not quite a good match for Portia. But Portia assured him that as he owned her, he also owned all that she had. So now they began making preparations for their marriage. In the meantime, Graciano and Nerissa too had met and decided to marry. When they told Portia of their wish, she wished them happiness and proposed that their marriages should be solemnized at the same time. While Bassanio and Portia were busy celebrating their happy marriage and preparing for the feast, a messenger came from Antonio. Bassanio read the letter his friend had written to him. His face became pale as the letter narrated a tale of woe. His friend Antonio had lost all his ships and he was too poor now to pay Shylock back the money. It was a terrible news, for Shylock was already there to claim his pound of flesh. Portia was anxious to know what made Bassanio looked so pale. Bassanio said, "Oh, my sweet Portia, nothing can save the life of my dear friend Antonio. A poor man like me would never dare ask for your hands if Antonio had not helped me. He pawned his life to get the money for me. It is for me that he is going to die, for no man can live when a pound of flesh is cut away from his body." Portia did not take much time to decide what they should do. She said to Bassanio, "You must go at once with all my money and wealth and pay Shylock 20 times more than what you owe to him. You cannot hesitate to take money from me. Now all I have is yours." Portia lost little time and married Bassanio before he left, for as her husband, now he would have the legal claim on her wealth. Graciano and Nerissa too were married, and Bassanio and Graciano left for Venice. In Venice, Antonio was already in prison, awaiting trial for failing to repay Shylock on the appointed day. He would be tried in the court of the Duke according to the law. Bassanio did everything to persuade Shylock to accept the money. But Shylock would not relent, as he had set his mind on his revenge. So Bassanio could not wait for the day when the cruel Shylock, insisting on the pound of flesh, would bleed Antonio to death. He did not know what he could do to save his dear friend's life. But Portia knew what she should do. Left alone, she began to think of ways to save Antonio. She was no longer the meek wife of Bassanio. She wrote to an eminent lawyer whom she knew. His name was Bellario. She told him everything about Antonio's case and sought his advice. She asked the lawyer to send the counselor's gown with his advice. When she received both, Portia put on the counselor's dress and with Nerissa, in disguise like her, left for Venice. Portia was now the young lawyer and Nerissa her clerk, wearing men's robes and wigs. When they reached Venice, the trial of Antonio had already begun, before the Duke and the senators. Portia as Balthasar gave Bellario's letter of introduction to the Duke, and the Duke allowed her to plead in place of the learned counselor. Even Bassanio could not recognize Portia in disguise, nor could Graciano recognize her clerk, Nerissa. Portia saw her husband standing by Antonio. Shylock too stood there. The Duke tried hard to persuade Shylock to give up his demand for a pound of flesh, but Shylock would not relent. Bassanio then offered Shylock whatever amount he would ask for. But Shylock only said, "I must have the pound of flesh and nothing else." Portia too would like Shylock to be merciful, as she said, "God blesses one who shows mercy to others. If justice you seek is tempered by mercy, you would be only nearer to God." But Shylock would not listen. So Portia agreed that Shylock could not be denied justice. She asked the Duke to allow the Jew to have the pound of flesh in accordance with the law. Everybody present in the court was shocked. Bassanio asked the young counselor to alter the law a little and save the life of his friend. But Portia said, "The law cannot be changed, nor can one be encouraged to break it. Your friend cannot back out now. He must repay the Jew with his pound of flesh." Shylock was delighted to hear this, and he cried out, "Here comes Sir Daniel, the upright judge, who had great wisdom." And thus he was prepared with his knife to cut off the flesh. Portia read the bond once again and said to Shylock, "You would have the pound of flesh you demand. The law cannot deny it to you. But even then, I would ask you to be merciful and take the money instead." But Shylock had already begun to sharpen his knife. So she told Antonio to bare his breast and let the Jew cut off flesh. Antonio was prepared to die, and he bade his friend Bassanio farewell, saying, "It is no use grieving for my misfortune. Commend me to your wife and tell her how dearly I loved you." Bassanio was overwhelmed by grief and remorse, for he could not forget that he was responsible for the terrible end his friend had come to. He said, "Dear friend, My wife is as dear to me as my life, but I am prepared to sacrifice my life and my wife if it would save your life, for I value your life more than anything else. Portia heard all this, but instead of being offended, she appreciated Bassanio's sentiments, but still she said, I am afraid your wife would not quite be happy to hear this. In the meantime, Shylock grew very impatient. Portia asked if the scales to weigh the flesh were ready. Then she asked Shylock to see that while cutting his pound of flesh, Antonio had not bled to death. But that was exactly what Shylock had intended, so he dismissed the plea and eagerly approached Antonio with his long knife. Then Portia said again, Wait, little Jew, as it is in the bond, you can cut off a pound of flesh, but you must do it without shedding a single drop of blood. The bond clearly mentions only a pound of flesh and nothing else. So if a single drop of blood is taken with it, you will lose everything you have. All those present in the court were amazed and happy to hear Portia say this. Shylock alone was at sea, for he knew that it was not possible to cut the flesh off without shedding blood. Now what was uppermost in his mind was not revenge, but the money that Bassanio offered. He turned to Bassanio and said, You made an offer to pay back the money 3 times over. I accept your offer. Bassanio was a happy man, and now that his friend's life was safe, so he readily took out the money. But Portia said he would have only a pound of flesh and nothing else. Then she said to Shylock, Come, Shylock, take a pound of flesh. What makes you hesitate? But Shylock cried out, I don't need it now. Please let me have my money. But Portia was very stern now. She said, It is not in the bond. A little while ago you refused to take that money and insisted on having the pound of flesh. Now if you don't take that pound of flesh, the law of Venice cannot let you go. You must be prepared for the punishment the law metes out to you for planning to murder a good citizen of Venice. Half your property will now be given to Antonio and the other half will go to the state, and the Duke may consider giving you more severe punishment too. So you must kneel before him and beg for mercy. Now Shylock could see that he did not deserve mercy, as he scoffed at it when the Duke and the young counselor prayed for it to save the life of Antonio. But the Duke was merciful, and Antonio too was generous enough to say, I will not take my share of the Jew's property if he becomes a Christian. Then Shylock was told to sign a paper bequeathing all that he had to his daughter Jessica, whom he had disowned for running away and marrying Lorenzo, a Christian. The Jew could not but obey Portia and Antonio now. He said, I am very ill. Please have pity on me and let me go. Send the papers after me and I'll sign them. Thus the trial came to an end, and Shylock was allowed to go. But Antonio and Bassanio would not let Portia and Nerissa go. Bassanio was so happy that he insisted on giving something to Portia as a token of his gratitude. Portia would not take anything, but when Bassanio was consistent, she thought of playing pranks on her husband. She said, I would not disappoint you. If that will please you, I would like to accept that ring from you. Bassanio was taken aback, for it was the ring that his dear wife had given him and made him promise that he would never part with it. He said, My wife gave this to me and promised that I would never part with it. So I will give you another ring much costlier than this. But Portia wouldn't have only that. So Antonio, as grateful to Portia as Bassanio, persuaded his friends to give the ring to the young lawyer who had saved his life. The same way Gratiano too gave his ring to Nerissa as a token of his thankfulness. So taking the rings from their husbands, Portia and Nerissa hurried back home. Their husbands and Antonio followed them. At Belmont, Portia, not in disguise now, received Antonio cordially. They were all very happy, for Antonio was with them. But soon the peace of the house was threatened, as Nerissa wanted to show her the ring she had given him. Gratiano confessed that he had given the ring to the clerk of the great judge who had saved the life of Antonio. Nerissa was furious, for Gratiano had broken his promise, which no faithful husband should do. But Gratiano said, I did exactly what my master Bassanio did. Portia looked at Bassanio as if she did not know Bassanio now saw no alternative to admitting of his guilt. I would never part with the ring, but the young counselor insisted on having only the ring. I know I should not have given it to him, but how could I deny one? Anything who had saved Antonio. Portia looked rather shocked and extremely angry. She said, "Now I see that you are too capricious to remain faithful to one woman. You must have given my ring to some other woman." Antonio did not quite expect Portia to be so seriously hurt, and he knew who was to blame for such unhappy turns. As if to apologize, he said to Portia, "Bassanio is not to be blamed for what he did. I made him do it. So if one has to be punished, it should be me." Portia could no longer pretend to be angry. She brought out the ring and gave it to Bassanio, telling him not to part with it again. Then she told Bassanio how she appeared in the palace, in the place of Bellario. As she showed the letter of Bellario to them, it was clear that the young lawyer and the clerk were but Portia and Nerissa in disguise. Bassanio was delighted to know that it was the courage and wisdom of his wife that saved the life of his friend. Soon after, Portia brought some letter for Antonio, and they all learned that the ships of Antonio that were considered lost had reached Venice with the rich cargoes. Antonio was a rich man again, and they were all happy. Please like, share and comment on this video. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thanks for watching.